Well, good morning, everybody. How are we doing? This is Jeremiah, and we are having a very important webinar today. They don't get much more important than this one. We're going to be talking about drawing corruption. It is a very, very important subject. Before I explain how important it is, I just want to tell you a couple housekeeping items. That is, of course, this is being recorded like all of our webinars. It's going to be up on the website later today, so you'll be able to reference it and certainly send it to any of your coworkers who missed it, who say, "What's the big deal about corruption?" You're going to want this one. Also, though, you are watching it live, you're here with us, so there is that Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. I would recommend you just click it right now so you can get that little box situated so it doesn't distract you too much, but it'll make it quicker for you to type a question to us. And also note, you're going to be able to see the answers that we type to other people's questions. So it makes a great little companion. And then, of course, near the end, I'm sure we'll be answering a lot of your questions live as well. So it's not only typed answers. We are here with you for this. This is a very important subject. Like I said, the part of our continuing just series in trying to address this really extremely at times crippling issue. I'm here to provide the color commentary. James is going to walk us through all the stuff, but I get to tell you the horror stories. I have seen stuff. We have had people with multi-drawing sets that the same Xref was across all of the files, and suddenly they couldn't open any of them. Imagine that. How much does that cost? How much does that cost to lose an entire drawing set? And that's what you need to think of when you see that warning box that we have saying that there is drawing corruption detected in the file. You need to think to yourself, how much is that going to cost me and my company if next week I can't even open the file? Is that going to be expensive? That's why we engineered that, and that's why we have this webinar. This is an extremely imperative subject. It absolutely can and will render a drawing completely useless. And before it gets useless, it'll just render all the quantities useless because there'll be any number of objects in there that are just no longer land effects objects. They're just generic CAD objects. So your quantities start to slip, things start to fall. You can't move around in the file. Then you can't even open it. It is that important of a subject. So kudos to you for signing up for this because this is extremely good knowledge to have, and you're going to hear it right from our mouths. So with no further ado, I'm going to hand this over to James to take us away.
Thank you, Jer. Good morning, everyone. I like how Jer stressed the importance of dealing with drawing corruption as soon as you can. This is definitely a tale of the frog in the boiling water, and if you just keep ignoring those warnings of drawing corruption, it's not a matter of if it's going to damage your data, it's a matter of when it's going to damage your data. So to begin, that's me. I'm James. I'm part of the content creation team. I'm part of the manufacturer relations team, and I'm part of the video production team here at LandFX. I'm going to go ahead and walk you through a quick slideshow that's going to outline everything for us today, and then we're going to get into some real world examples and walk through how to actually clean and address some of these things. Here's our quick outline for the day. We're going to first talk about what drawing corruption is. Then we're going to talk about Autodesk's recommendations, how they recommend you address some of this corruption. We're going to talk about the nuke tool and how land effects can help you address drawing corruption. And then last but not least, we're going to talk about the manual cleaning steps for cleaning your drawings. There's going to be a combination of all of these in some cases. And it's going to be good to know how to use all of these methods to clean your drawings. I know for me personally, and probably many of you, drawing corruption seems like a daunting topic, and it's definitely a big one. But I think like most complex topics, if you can wrap your head around the base principles of it, it's going to help you address it. So if you kind of understand how corruption works and where it comes from, then hopefully we can arm you with the tools you need in order to deal with it before it becomes a big issue. So moving forward, what is drawing corruption? Well, drawing corruption basically can be thought of as the degradation of your saved data. So like I said, it's not a matter of if drawing corruption is going to affect you, it's a matter of when it's going to affect you. So the DWG file format is an archaic one. It comes from the 80s. And despite its shortcomings, Autodesk hasn't updated. And it's susceptible to drawing corruption from a number of entities, such as Regaps or registered applications, proxy objects, Dgn line types, layer filters, scale list entries, shape definitions, and probably more. These are going to be the most common entities that we see causing drawing corruption. And I listed them here in order of commonality from my point of view. Like most of the time I see Regaps are going to be the most common thing causing drawing corruption, followed by proxy objects and so on. You may have some of these, you may have one of them, but when you have drawing corruption, these are going to be the big red flags. It's important to know that in many cases, when you have drawing corruption, it's not due to just one thing. It could be a combination of them. It's important to know that corruption is not a virus, but thinking of it as a virus can kind of be helpful. That's because it has a way of jumping from drawing to drawing through your instance of CAD. So I'm going to harp on this a lot during this webinar, but if you go through all the steps to clean a drawing and then you just close your drawing, but you don't close down CAD all the way, as soon as you open a clean drawing, that corruption can jump right back into it. So it's really imperative that when you're cleaning and addressing drawing corruption in your DWGs, that you actually are going to close down CAD completely to protect all of your other clean drawings. It can also, like Jared mentioned in the beginning, if there's an Xref that has drawing corruption and it's attached to another drawing, it can also corrupt that drawing as well. So it's not a virus, but it can kind of behave like one. So that might be worth keeping in the back of your mind. And it's also important to note that drawing corruption is not created by land effects. A lot of times we see people confused by the error messages, thinking that somehow land effects created the drawing corruption, but that's not the case. We're just letting you know that we've detected it, and hopefully we can help you clean it as well. So that's kind of the gist of it. If you can understand that the corruption is coming into your drawing from a number of different angles, and you can learn to look for those red flags, and then you understand how the corruption can jump from drawing to drawing, it's going to help you when you're cleaning your drawings. So first, let's talk about Autodesk and how they recommend cleaning corruption or cleaning your drawings that are corrupt. Registered applications, or Regaps, I'm going to probably be saying Regaps for most of this, are a fundamental functionality of land effects that land effects actually relies on to function properly. They're going to allow land effects to tie data to dumb objects. The problem is when you get an unregistered Regap or a Regap that is causing corruption, it can duplicate itself, and your drawing can become full of a number, literally thousands of unregistered Regaps, and this can really bloat your file size, and it can create a lot of damage. If this Regap system becomes haywire, it can literally, kill your whole drawing. So when you're seeing that message sign popping up warning you that you've got corruption in your drawing, it might be worth it to you, or you might think it's worth it to just ignore the drawing and continue on with your day. But again, it's the frog in the boiling water. We can't emphasize this enough. If you keep ignoring those messages, then you're just sitting on a ticking time bomb. Some signs that your drawing could be corrupt is if your file size is increasing at a crazy rate, or if your drawing performance is starting to suffer. If your drawing is slow and sluggish and your pick points are laggy, that could be a sign of drawing corruption. So these are things to look out for. Like we've said already, the damage from excessive regaps can literally render all of your smart objects dumb. Things like plants, callouts, irrigation symbols, they can all just be reverted to plain blocks. And this can cause hours of lost work, days of lost work, weeks of lost work. So it's important that you take a few minutes to clean your drawings before you let them get out of hand. Because these regaps are the most common form of corruption, Autodesk has actually created a tool for us to use that we are able to run many drawings through at once, and it's going to pull out all of the bad regaps. This is called the Regap Cleanup utility, and we're going to show you how to acquire it, install it, and use it. This isn't the end-all be-all of drawing corruption. In fact, this only addresses regaps. So in many cases, if your drawing has corruption from proxy objects or some of those other entities that we talked about previously, you're going to need to take your cleaning process a step further. But that's not to say this is not worth it. The Regap utility is still worth having on hand and using as often as you can. After that, we're going to talk about how we at LandEffects recommend you address drawing corruption. And a big portion of that is going to be the nuke tool. The nuke tool is a very powerful tool that automates a number of processes. And when we get into the demonstration, we'll talk more exactly about what it does. But here in the slideshow, I just want to bring up a few key points of things to look out for when you're using the nuke tool, because the nuke tool is going to be probably your best tool to fight drawing corruption 90% of the time, but there might be these odd cases in which that nuke tool might not be the right move. So some important things to note about nuke before we move forward are going to be that it's going to remove your layout tabs. If you have tabs in a drawing that has corruption and you need to retain those tabs, you probably are going to be better off doing the manual cleaning steps. However, we do recommend that you take those sheets and you create separate drawings for them anyways. It's just generally a better practice. Nuke, when it's running, will also revert your UCS. So if you have a specific UCS set, you're going to want to use a reference line. We recommend you just draw a line facing due east. That way, when you open your clean drawing and the UCS is not where it was, you have that reference point to quickly put everything back. It's also going to remove your layer states. It's not going to remove any layers that have objects on them. However, if you are going to plan on building upon the drawing where you left off and you need those additional layers, you'll want to reload your layer state using the layer state tool. It's also going to reset the scale on your drawing. This is really easy to reset. It's just important to note because if you're not paying attention and you're going really fast, then you might not notice that your scale hasn't been reset. And then it's also going to remove proxy objects from the drawing. So this is a big one. And you're going to see this today where you go clean your regaps and then you think you're good, but your drawing's still full of proxy objects that are giving you a headache. So nuke is also going to remove those from your drawing, which is a really convenient step as well. And then if you get a weird error message, which is pretty rare when you run nuke, one possible outcome is that your file name has some strange characters in it. Say you have like a % or a special character in it, that can sometimes trip up the nuke tool. So be mindful of your file names when you're running nuke, just so that it can go smoothly. These are important to understand so that you can prep your drawing before you run nuke and do all the things that you need to so that nuke is as successful as it can be. Finally, last little point I want to make on nuke is it creates a quarantine file. This is a backup file of your drawing. So let's say you run nuke and then suddenly your layouts are gone or some of your drawing was deleted because it was corrupt or if there's proxy objects that were removed and you needed them, then don't worry. You can always just go back to the quarantine file and be back at square one. So there's really no downside to trying nuke. It's not some end-all be-all tool that's going to ruin your drawing even more. And then we're going to go through the manual cleaning steps. The manual cleaning steps might be the most tedious. but they also give you the most control because at every step of the way, you're going to be able to do it yourself. It's not automated. So you're going to have a little bit more control than if you run through Nuke. As Jared pointed out in the beginning, it's really important that you clean all your Xrefs first. If you have a corrupt Xref and it's attached to a number of drawings, then even if you clean that drawing, that Xref is just going to bring that corruption right back. So deal with your Xrefs first, and then go ahead and keep cleaning everything else as needed. That way you prevent the spread of corruption from drawing to drawing. Again, we're going to harp on this a lot. Close down CAD and open a fresh instance before you open a clean drawing. You don't know if there are corrupt objects that are going to get into your clean drawing that are still in that instance of CAD. And just like the Nuke tool, the first thing you're going to want to do before you start manually cleaning any drawing is you're going to want to save a backup copy. That way, if something goes wrong during the cleaning process, you can always revert back to where you started. Then you're going to want to turn on and thaw all your layers so that you can see everything and have a good idea of what's going on in the drawing. The last thing you want to do is miss something because some layers were off or thawed. I'm sorry, or frozen rather. Then what you want to do is select all objects and only deselect the objects that you plan to keep. We'll show this in the demonstration, but sometimes there'll be weird objects in model space wandering off screen where you can't see them. And those could be objects that are giving you issues. So it's important that just to select all and delete everything that you don't want. There's no reason when you're cleaning a drawing to have these extraneous objects in it. This step will be optional, but we recommend running the overkill command. If you don't know what the overkill command is, it's going to delete any overlapping objects. This is going to help polish your drawings and just give them that extra level of cleanliness. We'll talk about this more in the demonstration as well. You'll want to go ahead and freeze any layers that are not in use, because when you run Purge, it's going to get rid of any empty layers. But let's say there's objects on a layer that you don't want. Purge won't delete them because there'll be the objects. So if you freeze them, they'll go away. And then you're going to want to run Purge or the PRG command. The Purge command is going to do things all right, but the PRG command is going to fire the Purge command 4 times, which just makes it a more thorough and much faster way to purge your drawings. Sometimes when you run just the normal Purge, you'll run into some blocks or some other things, and there'll be some additional steps that you need to take, or you might need to run Purge again. So running the PRG command kind of is just like a 1 button and you're done when it comes to purging. Then you're going to want to delete all the Regaps. It is important to note that if you run your drawing through the utility Regap cleanup tool, and then you're still having issues with your drawings, when you're following the manual steps, you're still going to want to do this step, because sometimes deleting the Regaps manually will find Regaps that the utility tool missed. And then you're going to want to run the audit command to fix any errors, and it'll ask you if you want the system to fix the errors that it finds, and of course we want to say yes to that prompt. Once you've done all of this, you're going to want to clean export your drawing, and this is going to allow you to have a clean separate file. And then you're going to, of course, want to close down CAD completely before you open up that clean file to check it out. I know that was a lot of information, so before we jump right into going through all the demonstration, do we have any questions?
We definitely have a couple of questions. I was able to answer them, but yeah, a good one was just regarding, Jeff asked kind of regarding what sort of schedule, how do you, what's the best way to clean files or things like that. And the main point I just wanted to stress is, without fail, this corruption is coming from Xrefs that you receive. And so the important one is, when you receive a file, put it into a certain folder that's even named, incoming, something like that. So oh, you don't ever attach a file from the incoming folder. You wait until you get a chance to clean it, then you copy the cleaned one into a completely different folder that even says cleaned. You know what I mean? And so then that's a very helpful, certainly for a staff, because it's a flurry of files going in and out. And we know that's the biggest challenge with drawing cleanup is, who knows who received some new Xref, blah, blah, blah. And so the process is phenomenally important. And so you want a process that really helps guide your team to primarily prevent just blindly attaching any files to Xref. That's where you're going to have your problems. But that was really and we got some other questions coming in, so I'll get to typing answers to these ones, but you can keep going here.
Okay, yeah, let's jump right into it. Okay, so here's my desktop. Let's begin with Autodesk's recommendation, the Cleanup utility tool. To show you how easy this is to find and install, I'm just going to go ahead and show you how to do that, because I know that's easier to have someone show you how to do it than having to follow steps on a page at sometimes. So if you come to our homepage and you go to support and you just go to our search option here, all you need to do is type in Autodesk Cleanup and spell it correctly, and then search. And the very first knowledge base article here that comes up is going to be about drawing corruption. And this beautiful orange box here might unfortunately be a frequent flyer of yours. So if you are used to seeing this warning, then you're in the right place. All you need to do.
Are you? We're kind of looking at your screen showing just the Let's
Oh,
Go.
okay. Let me reshare the other screen. I don't know why it didn't go. Do you see my desktop now?
There we go. Now we get your desktop.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
So like I said, if you come to our homepage, all you need to do is come down to the search function here and type in Autodesk Cleanup. And this very first knowledge base article here is going to be the one that you want. And this is going to be the corruption warning dialog box that you might have seen before. You can see here in this example, it's quite a large number of corrupt objects. If you scroll down here to this green button, this cleanup.exe file, this will get you the most up-to-date version of the Autodesk Cleanup utility. You can also go straight to the Autodesk website, and they have a page here for it. We're going to be using the 21 through 23 version. It's important that you find the version that corresponds to the year of CAD you're using. And I think that it's important to note that the 23 version is not working yet. I tried to run it, and Autodesk hasn't updated it yet. So if you guys want to help me bug AutoCAD or Autodesk, maybe they'll be more likely to update it faster. But regardless of which way you acquire it, it'll download a zip file. And typically by default, that'll be your downloads folder. But for today's example, I have it here on the desktop. What you want to do is make sure that you extract it to the correct file. So you're going to want to find your Autodesk folder. For me, that's going to be local disk, program files, Autodesk, and then you want to make sure you choose the corresponding year. If you try to install 23, it's going to give you a no entry point error, and you're going to not be able to run it. So we're going to go ahead and run it in our 22 file because that's the most current one that I was able to get to work. All you need to do is select that folder to extract the contents to and say extract. For me, it's going to ask me if I want to replace it because I already have it installed, and I'm going to, just to show you how quick and easy it is. And then you're going to click continue, and it's going to go ahead and install that in the correct folder for you. From here, all you need to do is scroll down until you find the executable file, and the icon looks like a little broom. And we recommend that you right click and create a shortcut. This is going to warn me that it can't create the shortcut here, and it's going to ask me if I want it on the desktop, and I'm going to go ahead and say yes. So from this point, you can see now I have my little cleanup utility shortcut. All I need to do is double click that to run it, and that makes it very convenient to now access this and use this as my first step in cleaning all of my drawings. One cool thing about this is I can choose specific files, or I can choose whole folders and include subfolders. So in this example, for the drawings we're going to be working with today, I've got this folder here called Drawing Corruption. And if I open this, I've got a site plan, and then I have a separate folder in here called Xrefs, where I have 2 drawings that I want to Xref to my site plan. So like Jer was pointing out, your organization of your files is important. If these were just sent to you, your first step should always be to clean them before you start working with them. In this case, I know all these drawings are full of corruption, and we're going to go ahead and show you how to address that. So if I wanted to run this folder through the Regap Cleanup utility, I could drag and drop it, or I could browse and find it here. For me, I have these right on my desktop, and then I can choose Add. And because I have the Include subfolders checked, you can see here it drilled down into my Xref folder as well and grabbed my 2 Xref drawings. Once you have all the drawings loaded that you want to clean, you can go ahead and say OK, and it's going to go ahead and run through the cleanup for you. So here you found that it purged 89 unreferenced Regaps. So right off the bat, we've got those out of the way. If you're lucky, that might be all you need to do to clean your drawings, but in a lot of cases, and in the cases today, we're going to have more problems. So we're going to have to keep cleaning. But that's how easy it is to get the Regap Cleanup utility, install it, and run it. I mean, that only took a minute or 2. So it's there's no reason not to do it. But moving forward, let's say that your drawings still have corruption or proxy objects or something. How do you address that? So if I start with this irrigation Xref, I'm going to go ahead and open this in CAD. It's going to load up. And in this case, because I've already opened this drawing, I'm going to get my Proxy dialog box to pop up. So once I go ahead and I click Agree here, it'll load the drawing for us. And we'll start addressing how to deal with this. So here's the drawing. If you haven't seen this dialog box before, or you're wondering why yours looks different, it might show up short like this. All I do is I like to drag it down so I can see more of what's going on here. And if I scroll through this, you can see how many proxies it's finding. It looks like most of these are coming from AutoCAD Civil 3D, which is pretty common. Proxy objects are going to come from other programs that are not CAD, and CAD doesn't know how to display them or what to do with them. So these can cause corruption in your drawing. For the most part, we recommend that you click this option here to do not show proxy graphics. And we're going to choose that setting for now, and we're going to say OK. So we know we have a large number of proxies in this drawing. And the best way we recommend dealing with this is the nuke tool, because it goes that extra step beyond getting rid of the Regaps, and it gets rid of the proxies. But before we do that, let's check out a couple of things. First, we want to check our option settings. So we type options and hit enter, and then come to the open and save tab here. And these object ARX application settings are pretty important. You want these to show like mine are showing. You want command invoked chosen, and you want do not show proxy graphics chosen, and you want this box checked definitely. You want the proxy information dialog box to show up. That's the one we just saw in the beginning. You definitely want that option checked so that every time you open a drawing, it'll let you know what proxies it sees. So if your settings are not like this, we recommend running them this way. So if you need to change them, you can go ahead and click apply and then close this. So now moving forward with your settings, you know, we're pretty good. Now, before we move on and just go ahead and run nuke, let's check out a couple of things. First of all, you would want to address your layouts. If you had layouts down here that you needed to keep, you would want to either move those out into their own drawings or not nuke them. Another thing you want to check is always check your external reference palette and see if you have any Xrefs attached to the drawing. If you did have them here, you could go ahead and detach them and then clean this drawing. And then once the other Xrefs were cleaned, you could then reattach them and you would be free of corruption. But you really want to pay attention to those Xrefs because they can also contain corruption that'll reinfect you. So another thing we want to check out before we run nuke is we want to take a look at our layers. You can see here I have got one layer off, and you can just see how many layers are in this drawing right now. So before we do anything else, what we want to do is come up here to our Manage ribbon, and we want to use these buttons to thaw all layers. So it's going to thaw any frozen layers, and we want to turn on all layers. So you saw some of this additional line work show up when we did that. Now, before we run Nuke, let's just go ahead and do a Control All and look over here in our Properties tab to get an idea of what we've got in this drawing. So right now, this looks just like lines and blocks, like mostly basic stuff. Sometimes if you see proxy entities in there, that could be a red flag. But the reason I want to show or take a look at this now is because after I clean this, I want to see if there's any difference, see if I lost anything. So we know we have 471 objects. We've turned on all of our layers. We've checked our layouts and our Xrefs. I think now is a good time to go ahead and run the nuke command. So the nuke tool is here on your Manage tab. You can also find it down here on your Admin tab, or of course, you could always just type nuke and hit enter. So we're going to go ahead and click that. Nuke will always give you this box here that tells you what it's going to do. So really quickly, let's run through these. It's going to save as, it's going to make that quarantine copy. So if anything goes wrong, we know we can get back to this stage. It's going to run an audit and look for any errors in the drawing. It's going to purge all, and it's going to delete anything like Regaps that it finds. It's going to reset the scale, and it's going to deal with anything else that can cause corruption, like Dgn Line Types. Dgn Line Types, I think most of the time come from MicroStation, so that one might not be a big deal to you. Quick note on Dgn Line Types: if you're using an old version of CAD, I think 2014 or older, when you run Purge, it won't address the Dgn Line Types, but there is a hotfix. So if you're doing this in an old version of CAD, look into getting that hotfix before you purge, or else those Dgn Line Types can kind of plague you. And then it's also going to remove all proxy objects from the drawing. Moving on, it's going to set everything to by layer and kind of organize that for you. And then it's going to pull all of the clean data out into a fresh drawing so that it doesn't become reinfected. This step here is where you're going to lose your layouts. It's going to grab everything into the new drawing, and your layouts will be left behind. So that's why we recommend you keep them separate, or you manually clean the drawing if you want to retain those layouts. So once you understand what it's going to do, you can go ahead and say OK, and it's going to go ahead and run through. So if you look here at the top, you're going to see it created that quarantine file for us, and now we have a clean file. Before I do anything, though, I want to make sure that I exit out of CAD, because at this point, if I were to open a clean drawing, there's a chance that I could reinfect it. I'm going to go ahead and say no to saving these because it already saved them for us. And we're going to take a look at those files. So here you go. We have our quarantine file, and that's got a file size of 298 kilobytes. And now our clean one's got a file size of 129 kilobytes. So immediately, that's a good sign. You can see that it removed a bunch of proxy objects and things from the drawing. So with CAD closed down completely, let's go ahead and open this irrigation plan back up and check things out and make sure that nuke ran correctly. While this is loading up, it might be a good time to see if there's any questions.
Oh boy, it's been a flurry. We got a good group here. We got some great questions. Was able to answer them. A big one that's come up here in these last little bout of questions is, the whole issue of having more than one layout sheet in a drawing, and just cannot stress enough that it is just simply dangerous. It is just unequivocally best practice to have a single sheet per drawing. Yes, I know that's a slight, very, very minor inconvenience. To claim it's anything more than a minor inconvenience is disingenuous. It is a minor inconvenience, but the benefit in terms of the damage control, particularly if a file does get corrupted, is massive. And then also it can scale up. What if you get a project that requires 150 sheets? Are you really going to have 150 layout tabs in one DWG? Of course not. So it just simply is the better choice for multiple reasons. And so that was, I don't want to necessarily get into an argument with people over it. Like, I understand it is at times it's like, this is the way I work and it's just much easier. It's like, sure, it is. From our perspective, when someone says, "Hey, I can't open this detail sheet, it had 35 sheets in it," what do we possibly tell that person? It's damage control, and that's the thing to keep in mind.
Yeah, definitely. Um, so now that we have our clean drawing open, you can see we didn't get any corruption errors or warnings, or any proxy warnings. Let's go ahead and take a look at things really quick. First of all, if I do a Control All, we can see that we retained all 471 objects, which tells us that none of these objects were bad, and that's a good thing. And if we come up here to our layers, you can see how many layers that Purge removed. This is probably less than half of the layers we had before. So like I mentioned earlier, if you now wanted to move on from this point, you could, and you needed additional layers, you could always just come up here and use your load layers tool. And if you were going to keep working on this drawing, in this case, you'd want to, reset your UCS and your scale and do all those things that we mentioned before. But now you can move forward with this drawing knowing that it's clean and that it's not going to infect additional drawings. So you can see how powerful the nuke tool is. Really, if you set it up for success, it's going to be the absolute fastest way to clean a drawing, especially if you don't have too many layouts in your drawing that you're going to lose. So moving on, if you are not able to run nuke for whatever reason, you can also manually clean a drawing. So this drawing here, the site plan, if this was an in-house drawing that you were working on and somebody sent you Xrefs, you might know that your site plan is already clean, but in this case, this one is not. So we'll go through the manual cleaning steps on this. I'm going to go ahead and open this in my same instance of CAD because I know I didn't already open a corrupt drawing in it, and because I know this one already has corruption. So let's go ahead and open this site plan here. And immediately we're greeted with the proxy dialog box. And you can see we have lots and lots of proxy objects here, mostly from Civil 3D in this case. For the time being, I'm going to go ahead and say do not show proxy graphics. And I'm going to say okay, and it's going to load. So much like Nuke does, let's run through these cleaning steps, but let's do them manually. So the first thing you'd want to do is save a copy of your drawings. You can name this whatever you want. I'll just go ahead and call it quarantine to stick with our standards. I like quarantine better than backup or copy because it's less easy to confuse it for what it means. Quarantine is just very obvious. Once you've saved your file, the next thing we want to do is come over here to our Manage tab, and we're going to want to thaw and turn on all of our layers, just so that we have a good idea of what is in this drawing. After you do that, you can kind of zoom out, and on this case, if I zoom out just a little bit, you can see I have other objects. And who knows, in this case, what else is in this drawing and where it is in model space. So what we want to do is do a Control-Alt to select all objects, and then we only want to deselect the objects we want to keep. So in this case, for my site plan, I only want to keep these objects here. So I'm going to hold Shift and deselect them. And then I'm going to go ahead and delete everything else. So in theory, this should only leave me with the objects that I want to keep. A cool way to confirm this is you can do a zoom extent. So you can type Z, enter, and then hit E for extends and hit enter. And it's going to focus on just the objects left in model space. So in this case, it zoomed right in on the stuff that we want to keep. So that's good. Now we also want to check our Xrefs. And you can see here that I have 2 of these. I want to detach these to make sure that if those are corrupt, they're not going to infect this. So I'm going to go ahead and detach. One note that I might make is if you are unable to detach an Xref, oftentimes that's a huge red flag that it's got some bad corruption. So if that is the case, you're probably going to want to address that immediately. So now that we've got the Xrefs detached and we've got all of our extraneous objects removed, we can go ahead and just check out what's left in the drawing. So again, I'm going to do a Control-A and then come over here to my Properties tab and just take a look. Now, there's no hard fast rule that you have to do this, but I like to do it and I want to show you in this demonstration so that we can see through our cleaning if we lose anything here or if there's any objects that stand out as red flags. So in this case, we've got 188 objects left in our model space. So we'll just check that after we're done cleaning. At this point, you have the option to run overkill. So since I have all my items selected, I can just hit the overkill button up here in the manage ribbon, or I could type overkill and hit enter. And then the default settings are great. I'm not going to change any of them. So I'm just going to say okay. And if I look down here in my command line, you'll see that it only found 2 objects. So in this case, there was not a lot going wrong. This is pretty clean drawing, but sometimes it can find hundreds of objects that were overlapping. This might not seem like a big deal, but it does add up. It can, if there's a lot of overlapping objects, it can create issues with your file size. It can create issues with plotting. And it can also create issues with just general drawing practice. You know, if you have 2 overlapping polylines and you're trying to snap to a specific point on one of them, and there's an overlapping polyline that has a vertice or something nearby, you can grab the wrong pick point by accident. So I just recommend running overkill. After we've done overkill, it's time to freeze any layers that you might not want. If you don't need to worry about that, then we can move on to the purge command. So when we go to manually purge, we have 2 options. If you look up here in the manage ribbon and you click this drop down, there's instant purge and then there is normal purge. Like I mentioned earlier, instant purge is going to be more thorough. It's going to purge multiple times. So that's what we recommend. If you're using your keyboard commands, you would type purge for the standard purge command, or you could type PRG for the instant purge command. So we'll go ahead and we'll run instant purge, and that's going to go ahead and purge everything out of the drawing. And once we've done that, we want to go ahead and delete all Regaps. So we already ran this drawing through the Autodesk Regap utility tool, but we're going to go ahead and use the delete all Regaps command up here anyways. If you're using your keyboard commands, you could type del Regaps and hit enter, but the button honestly is faster. And if we look down here in our command line, you can see that it found an additional 31 registered applications. So that just goes to show you that even though you run it through the Autodesk utility, it's still worthwhile to run it again when you're in here manually cleaning. After you've deleted your Regaps, you want to run an audit, and that's easy. You just go ahead and click the audit tool. And again, the keyboard commands are always shown down below. So if you wanted to type audit, you could. And if you look down at the command line here, I initiated the audit command, and it's asking me if we want to fix any errors that might be found. We want to go ahead and type Y and hit enter for that. In this case, it's good. We found 0 errors, so there was nothing there to fix. And now the last step of the manual cleaning process is going to be to do a clean export. Again, we have a button up here. You could also type AEC to ACAD and go through all the prompts, but honestly, the button's just much easier. So go ahead and click clean export. And if you look in our command line down here at the bottom, it shows where it's saved and how it added clean to the end of the drawing. So now if we want to go ahead and take a look at that, first thing we want to do is make sure that we exit out of CAD completely, because we did open this with a corrupted drawing. So we want to go ahead and close this all the way down to make sure that we don't reinfect a clean drawing. So now if you take a look at this, you can see a massive difference. So the quarantine one that we made was over 1,000 kilobytes, and the new one named clean is down to 155. That's a big difference. So if we go ahead and open this one, you could now take this clean drawing and name it whatever you'd like. But for this case, I'm just going to leave it as dash cleaned. And let's go ahead and open this guy back up and take a look at things and make sure things are the way we want them. While this boots up, it's a good time to check on questions if there were any.
Oh, of course, everybody. We got a lively group. Really, really appreciating all the input on it. But, you know, still some back and forth on the one sheet per DWG issue. But like I said, that's we're we're just saying our recommendations for that and the reasons why. But I'll let you keep going.
Okay. So that was a run through on the manual cleaning steps. You can see how if you're looking at the page, the documentation, so if we ever recommend doing the manual cleaning steps and you're trying to scroll through this long page, it's a ton of little steps, but really it's not that big of a deal once you get familiar with it. So your best friend is going to be the Manage tab. All the tools you need to manually clean are going to be right up here. And then it's just a matter of doing them in the correct order and making sure everything is running correctly. Now that we've cleaned this one, you'll notice that when I opened it in a new instance of CAD, we didn't get any corruption error warnings. We didn't get any proxy object warnings. So let's just kind of do a once over on this and make sure that it did indeed clean the way we were hoping. So if I do a Control All and I look at my Properties tab, you can see I still have my same 188 objects, which is great. That means none of those were proxy objects that got removed. We can go ahead and come up here and check out our layers and see how all of the empty layers were removed. And yeah, so it did clean the way we want it. And that is going to be worth your time as well. So you have the option to run Nuke, or you can manually clean them if you'd like. They're both really good ways to address corruption in your drawing. Nuke is just going to be faster and more convenient in almost all cases. So let's say you have a ton of drawings that you need to clean, like you have a huge file and you have 100 drawings or something. I mean, that might be a lot, but you can take care of a lot of this stuff with our Batchman tool. Now, I like to think of this next process, running these through Batchman, as kind of like cleaning light. It's going to do a lot of the processes for you, and it's going to automate them, and it's going to allow you to run them a number of drawings through at once. So like the Autodesk Cleanup utility, when you run Batchman, you have the option to choose multiple drawings to clean at once. If you open a drawing in CAD and you come over to your FX admin ribbon, you're going to see right next to the Nuke tool, we have Batchman. You might be familiar with Batchman from doing other tasks. Batchman's a really good tool. But when you look at it here, you'll see that we have the all by layer options and we have the Purge Plus option. That Purge Plus option is really cool. What it does is it's gonna be almost like Nuke in the sense of that it's gonna run through a lot of the cleaning steps and it's gonna automate them. So what Purge Plus will do is it'll delete all Regaps, it'll remove Dgn Line Types, it'll run PRG for you, or purge multiple times. And it's also gonna deal with any of your, it'll do your scale list cleanup, and it's gonna run Audit. So it's gonna do more than the Regap utility cleanup from Autodesk, but it's not gonna go as far as Nuke in the sense of it's not gonna deal with any of your proxy objects. So this might be a good alternative or a good first step to run, but some of your drawings, if they're coming from Civil 3D or they're just going to have proxy objects in general, you're going to want to either run Nuke on them or manually clean them. But the cool part is, like the Autodesk utility, you can add a single file, or you can add a folder, or a whole folder plus subfolders. So when Jer was kind of giving you a best practice tip earlier, talking about having a folder for all incoming drawings, you can literally run Batchman on that whole folder. And what that'll do is it'll open up each drawing and run through the process for you. It's not a foolproof way, like you said, it's not going to deal with proxies, but it is going to be able to do a lot of the cleaning for you. I'm not going to go ahead and run my drawings through here because I only have 3 of them and we're already addressing them in other ways, but I wanted to point out that Batchman can be a valuable tool for you in managing incoming files. So there's still going to be a couple other strange cases. For example, this Xref here for this topographic Xref. A lot of times the topographic drawings will be generated in a different program, and therefore they can come out as entirely proxy objects. So if I go ahead and open this, you'll see here I get my proxy dialog warning box. And typically what we recommend is saying do not show proxy graphics, but this is going to be one of those exceptions where we actually do want to see our show proxy graphics. If I were to say do not show proxy graphics and then click OK, this drawing will open up and it'll just look blank. If that happens to you, that's a good indicator that the drawing, everything in it, is entirely proxies. So if we go ahead and we say show proxy graphics and we open this one up, for now it looks like there's nothing, but I think if I do a zoom extends, it'll find it. Let me see. This happened to me before. There it is. It looked empty, but there is indeed proxy graphics right here. So this is going to be the topographic data for this drawing set that we have. And if I do a select all, and I look over here at my properties tab, you can see that there's 2,500 plus proxies that make this up. So this can be kind of a tricky situation for some of you. If this drawing is coming from within house, from the engineer, and it's coming from Civil 3D, let's say, you might not be able to do what I'm about to recommend. What I'm about to recommend is that you explode these proxy entities and break them up into objects that CAD can recognize. And then from that point, you are able to clean it. However, if you don't have permission to explode this, then what a workaround would be save this as a copy. And that way you're not exploding the original. And then you have your own separate copy of it as a reference point. The danger with that is, let's say the other person in your office makes an update to it and you don't catch that update, then you're not working on the most up-to-date version of this drawing. So if you are not able to explode it in this way, then you need to work with the people in your office to improve your workflow. You need to be the one to tell them that they're generating the drawing with corruption and they need to export it in a different manner. So aside from that, what we're going to do is show you one good way to deal with drawings like this. If you were to just go ahead and run nuke right now, it's going to go run through all of the steps that we've discussed, and it's going to delete all of the proxy objects. So if you run nuke, you're just going to get an error that says nothing left to save because it just got rid of everything. So what we need to do is convert or break some of these proxy objects down into AutoCAD objects. So if I just select all, in fact, I better just do a Control A because I don't know if there's going to be something floating off in model space. And then I type X for the explode button and hit enter. It'll run and you can see that it did find a bunch of objects to explode. Now, when I select all and I come over here to my properties tab, you can see how many more objects this drawing is made up of now. You can see I have a lot of lines and circles and things that AutoCAD is used to seeing now. And I still have 2,100 proxy objects. But now when I run my nuke command, or if I were to manually clean this, I have a way to retain the visual information and remove all of the proxies. So if I go ahead and I just go, after I explode, I definitely want to save though. I should have mentioned that before we exploded it, we should have saved as and made our own copy. In this case, because I'm not working with anyone else in my office on this drawing, I'm just going to go ahead and save it now. But just like you would with nuke or just like you would with manually cleaning, the first step should always be to save a separate copy or make your backup copy rather. So from now, we've exploded it. We can go ahead and run the nuke command. And again, we're used to seeing this and just say, okay. And it's going to go ahead and it's going to clean out all of those extraneous proxy objects. And it should leave us with just the AutoCAD objects. Once it's done, of course, I would want to close out CAD before opening everything, but really quick, we'll just do a Control All and we'll take a look at this. So you can see now all those proxy objects are gone. And this is now a clean object that I could safely attach to my drawing. So again, you're going to come in to some situations where it's tricky and you may not be able to explode it. But if you can make a copy of it or you have permission to explode it, then that is probably the fastest way to rid this drawing of corruption. With that being said, that kind of special circumstance here for this one that I thought was worth pointing out because it's common with topographic drawings. That pretty much wraps it up. Do we have any other questions coming in that we should address?
Well, let's see. Definitely time. Like for instance, when do you need to clean a file again? Once you clean a file, what then? And like that one is, like you mentioned, monitor the file size, monitor the file performance, make sure that proxy info display is turned on. So when you open a file, it displays the list of proxies so that when you see suddenly, thousands of proxies suddenly appear in a file that you are certain you cleaned, it's not so much that you need to clean the file again, which is true, but you need to investigate where the heck those proxies came from. So that's the due diligence there in just kind of monitoring them. But I would say probably like here on the tech support side, it's literally a joke, and we're not, like someone goes, "Do you think it's drawing corruption?" And you know what we look at first? We look at the file size. That's it. Someone sends us a file that's like 13 megabytes. We're like, yeah, that's undoubtedly corruption. There's no reason a planting plan would be that large. And so sure enough, it's drawing. We don't even have to open the file, and we're pretty sure. So definitely please monitor the file size, and that should be a huge indication right there of just simply looming corruption.
Yeah, in the site plan example we did, it's not crazy large file size, but you can see the difference there. It literally took out almost all of the data just from those proxy objects. So it's definitely a good indicator.
And then we just got a great question on, does it make sense to W block the exploded entities to reduce the file size? And that's true. Those are, there's two additional, actually multiple additional little cleanup steps like that. W blocking out all visible objects is a very simple cleanup process. That is a definite cleanup process. That was in the old days, when I first started CAD, that was what we always did, without fail. And we were always amazed at how much smaller the file would be. It's like, wait a minute, if I'm W blocking out only the visible objects, why would that be smaller? And you really have to, and let's put two and two together here. So what did that not include? Something invisible by definition, right? And if it's something invisible, it's unnecessary, and it's just simply invisible object corruption, proxy objects, dictionary objects, layer filters, things that you don't need and are just simply making the file bloated. So that's a good one. Just simply, another classic that Autodesk recommends is just inserting a file into a new file. Actually is a bit of a cleaning process, but it's not as robust as certainly anything that we've shown. But there are these additional, more simplistic little cleaning processes that can be done.
And there is also sometimes the unfortunate or the tedious situation where nuke won't run and you can't figure out what's hanging it up. And like Jared said, sometimes it'll be an invisible proxy, but sometimes it'll be something that's visible, but it's like a really tiny object in a giant drawing, and you have to manually sift through to try to find those sticking points. And sometimes it takes a little time to clean the drawing properly.
And then if you could go back to CAD, we did have one last great question, which is just to remember to show everyone how to turn on that proxy info display. So if you go to your AutoCAD options and open and save tab, and right there, show proxy information dialog box. That is one of those ones where I don't even understand why that's an option because this is so dangerous. You absolutely have to have that checked. So please make sure that's checked. As you can imagine, the only reason it would be unchecked, someone's like, oh, just get in my way. I'm trying to open this file and get my work done. You don't want to know if this file is possibly infected. It's kind of an important one. So please make sure that's checked. That is one of your key things, that and looking at your file size. And then like James mentioned, the other telltale sign of drawing corruption is when you click on any object other than a hatch, please don't test this on a hatch, but when you click on any object in the drawing, how quickly do those grip points appear? And it should always be instant, right? But if it's a number of seconds, that is undoubtedly drawing corruption, and that should be instant. So that's one of those classic telltale signs. But
Awesome.
on that note, hey, you have anything left, James?
That pretty much brought us to the end of everything I wanted to talk about for cleanup. Yeah, I think that's a good point to stop.
Well, great, everyone. Well, I hope you have a fantastic weekend. It's nice and warm and beautiful here. I hope it is where you are. Enjoy the weekend, be safe, have fun, and keep your drawings clean.
Thank you.